The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway, far too quiet for a late afternoon when my little boy was usually running around with his toys, squealing with laughter. I had left work early that day, wanting to surprise my family with dinner. My husband was supposed to still be at the office, and our babysitter Claire would be here with Danny until I got home. I walked in with grocery bags in my arms, smiling at the thought of my son's face lighting up when he saw me sooner than expected. But the smile died on my lips the moment I stepped into the living room. There she was, Clara sitting on the floor with Danny in her lap, his tiny hands clutching a stuffed bear. She was reading to him, her voice soft and almost sing-song. But it wasn't the reading that made my stomach twist. It was the word, the name. "Mommy will always love you, Danny," Claire whispered, pressing her lips against his hair. My hands froze. My chest tightened. Did I just hear that? For a moment I thought I was imagining things, but then she said it again, even clearer this time. "Mommy's right here, sweetheart." My son looked up at her with those innocent brown eyes, eyes that mirrored mine, and he didn't protest. He didn't correct her. He just accepted it. A rush of anger and disbelief surged through me. The grocery bag slipped from my fingers, and the crash of cans and boxes on the hardwood floor startled them both. Danny turned his head and squealed, "Mommy!" But he was looking at me this time, his real mother. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. Not when Claire's face went pale and then quickly shifted into something too sweet, too calculated. "Oh, Mrs. Harper!" she exclaimed, jumping to her feet, still holding my son like she had every right to. "You're home early. We were just playing a little game." I wanted to snatch Danny out of her arms, but I forced myself to stay calm. My voice came out colder than I intended. "A game? Calling yourself mommy isn't a game, Claire." She gave a nervous laugh, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know how kids are. They like to pretend. He called me mommy once by mistake, and I thought it was cute. It's harmless." But nothing about it felt harmless. The way she clutched my son a little tighter, the way her eyes lingered on him as if he were more hers than mine, it made my skin crawl. I reached for Danny. "Thank you, Claire. I'll take it from here." There was hesitation, a flicker of resistance, before she finally let him go. Danny nestled into my shoulder, and I kissed his forehead, but my heart was pounding too hard to savor the moment. That night, after she left, I told my husband what I had seen. I expected him to be outraged, furious, protective of me and our son. Instead, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck like I was burdening him. "Maybe you're overreacting, Anna," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Claire's been good with Danny. Kids mix things up all the time. It doesn't mean anything." "Overreacting?" I repeated, my voice breaking. She called herself mommy to our son, and he believed her. That isn't nothing, but he shrugged, brushing me off like it was all in my head. That dismissal hurt almost more than what I had witnessed earlier. It left me questioning myself, doubting my own instincts. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I had misheard. Yet, deep inside, a pit of dread was forming. I couldn't shake the image of Claire's satisfied smile, the way she'd said mommy like she was claiming something that wasn't hers, something that was mine. The next few days only made it worse. I started noticing subtle changes. Danny would sometimes slip and call me Anna, a name he had never used for me before. When I asked him where he got that, he said Claire told him it was okay because she was his mommy now too. The pit in my stomach grew heavier. Every time I confronted her, she brushed it off with her practiced sweetness, and every time I brought it up to my husband, he defended her, saying she was young, inexperienced, maybe just trying too hard to bond with Danny. But it wasn't just bonding. It was something darker, something deliberate. One evening, when I came home late from running errands, I paused outside the door before walking in. The voices inside stopped me in my tracks. "I love you, Danny," Claire was whispering. "Don't worry. Mommy will never leave you." And my son's tiny voice responded, "I love you too, Mommy." Tears burned my eyes as I stood there in the shadows, listening to the sound of my son calling another woman by the name that belonged to me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a game. It was a plan. Claire wanted more than just a babysitting job. She wanted my place in this family, and my husband didn't see it. Or maybe, worse, he didn't want to. That night, as I tucked Danny into bed and kissed his forehead, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let her take him from me. I wouldn't let her take my life, my family, my identity. But deep down, I already knew. The battle had only just begun. The next week felt like living inside a twisted nightmare. Claire showed up every morning with that same bright, innocent smile, the kind of smile that could fool anyone who didn't know better. She greeted me cheerfully, complimented my cooking, even asked about my work, as though she hadn't crossed the one line no babysitter should ever cross. But beneath that sugary exterior, I could see it. The subtle glances she gave Danny, the way her hand lingered on his shoulder, the quiet whispers I would sometimes overhear as I walked past the hallway. She was weaving herself into his little world, stitching herself into the fabric of his trust. Danny was changing too. My once cheerful, clingy little boy started pulling away from me. He no longer reached for me first when he was upset. Instead, he'd ask for Claire. At bedtime, he wanted her stories, not mine. And worst of all, he had begun to look at me with a strange sort of confusion, as though he wasn't sure who I was to him anymore. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and froze. Claire was crouched down at the table, coloring with Danny. He giggled when she drew a silly face, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Mommy, look! Claire made a puppy!" Claire didn't correct him. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she beamed and said softly, "That's right, sweetheart. Mommy made it just for you." The audacity made my chest ache. I slammed a cupboard door harder than I meant to, and Claire finally looked up, startled. She saw the fury in my eyes and had the nerve to shrug like it was no big deal. Later that night, when she had left, I confronted my husband again. "Do you hear what she's doing? She's letting him call her mommy. She isn't stopping him. She encourages it." But instead of siding with me, his face hardened with irritation. "Anna, you're reading too much into this," he said flatly. "Claire's been a blessing for us. Danny loves her. Why are you so determined to turn this into something ugly?" "Because it is ugly," I snapped, my voice trembling. "She's trying to replace me. Can't you see that?" But he just sighed. running a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "You're stressed, Anna. You've been working long hours, barely sleeping. Maybe you're just imagining things." Imagining things. That was the phrase that kept replaying in my head long after he went to bed, as if I couldn't trust my own eyes and ears, as if I were crazy. But the evidence kept piling up. A few days later, I came home early again. The house was quiet, too quiet, just like before. I crept toward the nursery, and what I saw through the crack in the door made me bite back a cry. Claire was sitting in the rocking chair with Danny curled up in her arms, humming softly. That part wasn't unusual. What chilled me was the way she was speaking to him in a low, coaxing voice. "You don't have to listen to her anymore," she whispered. "I'm your real mommy now. I'll take care of you. I'll never let you down like she does." My knees almost buckled. She was poisoning him against me, planting seeds of doubt in his innocent little mind. I pushed the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Claire jumped, her face flashing with guilt, before she quickly smoothed it over with a fake smile. "Oh, Mrs. Harper, I didn't hear you." Danny was just a little fussy, so I was calming him down, but I had heard enough. My hands were shaking as I took Danny from her arms. His little fingers clung to my shirt, but his eyes looked past me, searching for her, and that broke something inside me. That night, I told my husband again what I had heard. I expected needed him to finally believe me, but instead, his words cut me deeper than I could have imagined. "Anna, stop this," he said, his tone sharper this time. "Claire loves Danny like her own. She's dedicated, patient, kind. Why can't you just appreciate that instead of treating her like an enemy?" Tears stung my eyes. "Because she is the enemy. She wants to take my place. If you won't see it, then you're blind." He slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. "Enough! I won't listen to this anymore." I was left staring at him, stunned, broken. The man who was supposed to stand by me, protect me, trust me, was choosing her instead. It wasn't just Claire I was losing, it was him too. Over the next week, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like she had already claimed it. I'd find Danny clutching drawings she made for him, drawings where she had written Mommy plus Danny inside little hearts. I discovered toys that I hadn't bought, gifts she had given him without asking me. Even his vocabulary was shifting phrases I never taught him, words that sounded like hers. The walls of my own home were closing in on me, and I was powerless to stop it. But then, one fateful evening, the first crack in Claire's perfect facade appeared. As I was tidying the living room, I noticed a small leather-bound book sticking out from under the couch cushion. I picked it up, curious, and when I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. It was a diary. Claire's diary. And inside were pages filled with words that made my blood run cold. She wrote about me, about Danny, about my husband. She wrote about how she deserved a family like ours, how she was going to be the real mother, how she would make sure Danny forgot me completely. Each entry was more disturbing than the last, like a blueprint of a nightmare I hadn't even fully realized I was living. I snapped the book shut, my hands trembling. The proof was right there. She wasn't just playing games. She had a plan. But the question that haunted me wasn't just what she wanted. It was how far she was willing to go to get it, and deep down, I knew I was about to find out. The days after discovering Claire's diary were some of the darkest of my life. Every time I looked at her, I saw those twisted words etched into my mind. I will be his real mother. She doesn't deserve them. They belong to me. Those sentences were burned into my memory like scars, but knowing the truth and proving it were two different battles. I couldn't just storm into the kitchen, waving her diary in the air, screaming accusations. If I did that, she would cry, twist the story, make herself the victim, and my husband would believe her. He already thought I was paranoid. I needed him on my side. Without him, I had nothing. So I waited. I watched. Every smile, every soft word, every gentle stroke of my son's Harriac one was another thread in the web she was spinning. One afternoon, I found them together in the backyard. Danny was giggling as Claire pushed him on the swing, his little legs kicking happily. For a moment, it almost looked normal, like something I should have been grateful for. But then Claire leaned down and whispered, "Say you love Mommy, sweetheart." Danny squealed, "I love you, Mommy," and Claire's eyes locked with mine as she smiled. She wanted me to hear it. She wanted me to know she was winning. That night, after I tucked Danny into bed, I went to my husband again. This time I held the diary in my shaking hands. "You need to see this," I said firmly, pushing it toward him. "She's dangerous. She's writing about replacing me, about taking Danny away." "Read it." He frowned, flipping through the first few pages. For a moment, I saw hesitation flicker in his eyes. But then he snapped it shut and shoved it back at me. "Anna, this is ridiculous," he said sharply. "It's just a diary, a young woman venting her feelings. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" I hissed, my voice trembling. "She's fantasizing about stealing my child, about erasing me from his life. How can you stand there and pretend this is normal?" He rubbed his temples, exasperated. "Do you even hear yourself? You sound obsessed. Claire has been nothing but good to us. She helps with Danny. She takes care of things when you're too tired or busy. And now you're demonizing her because you're jealous." The word jealous struck me like a slap across the face. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. "You think I'm jealous of her?" I whispered, my throat tightening. "Of the babysitter who's trying to brainwash our son? Of the girl writing in her diary about how she deserves my family?" "Yes," he snapped, his voice rising, "because that's exactly how you sound, and I won't let your paranoia ruin this household." Tears blurred my vision. I could hardly breathe. He had chosen her over me, the man I trusted with my life, the father of my child, the person who vowed to stand by me. Thought I was the problem. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. I wasn't just fighting Claire anymore. I was fighting my own husband. The following days blurred together in a haze of dread. Claire strutted through my house with a confidence that made my stomach churn. She hummed while she cooked in my kitchen. She tucked Danny into bed as though it were her right. And when I walked into the room, she would give me that knowing smile, the one that said, "He doesn't believe you. You've already lost." But I hadn't lost. Not yet. One evening, as I came home later than usual, I heard laughter echoing from the living room. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and froze when I saw what was happening. My husband was sitting on the couch with Danny nestled in his lap. Claire was right beside them, leaning in close, her hand resting casually on his shoulder. It was a picture of a family, my family, and I wasn't in it. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching as she told a silly story, making them both laugh. Watching as my husband looked at her with something I couldn't quite name. Was it admiration? Gratitude? Something worse? The bile rose in my throat. I couldn't take it anymore. "Get your hands off my husband," I said, my voice low and shaking. All three of them turned to look at me. Danny blinked, confused. My husband's face twisted with anger. And Claresha just smiled sweetly, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. "Anna," my husband said, his tone sharp, "you're out of line." "Am I?" I snapped, glaring at Claire. "Because this little game ends now. You're not his mother. You never will be. And if you think you can steal my son or my husband, you're delusional." Claire's eyes glittered, but she didn't respond. She didn't need to. My husband spoke for her. "Enough, Anna," he barked. "I won't let you destroy this family because of your insecurities. Claire has been nothing but loyal. You're the one tearing us apart." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see the truth. But all I could do was stand there, trembling, as the walls of my own home closed in around me. Later that night, I found myself back in Danny's room. He was asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around him. I sat on the edge of his bed, brushing a curl from his forehead, and whispered a promise through my tears. "They won't take you from me. I don't care what it takes. I will fight for you, Danny. I will never let her win." But as the words left my mouth, I felt the weight of doubt settle in my chest, because no matter how fiercely I vowed to protect him, the truth was inescapable. The battle wasn't just with Claire anymore. It was with my own husband, and I was starting to fear I was already losing. The tension in our home had grown so thick, it felt like I was suffocating. Days passed, each one worse than the last, as Claire's presence wrapped itself tighter around my family like a parasite feeding off our trust. I could see it in the way she lingered near my husband, the way she slipped her hand into Danny's as though she had some unspoken claim over him. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Every time I spoke up, my words were dismissed as paranoia, my warnings brushed aside as emotional hysteria, and Claire thrived on it. She'd tilt her head and offer a sympathetic smile, as though I were the broken one, the unstable wife who needed help. But I wasn't crazy. I had her diary, her own handwriting, her words that proved everything. And yet, it wasn't enough. Not until I could make him see the truth for himself. The opportunity came one evening when my husband invited his parents over for dinner. It was supposed to be a casual family night, but I saw it as my chance. If I exposed Claire in front of witnesses, maybe he would have no choice but to listen. I spent the afternoon cooking, my hands trembling as I chopped vegetables, my heart pounding with every tick of the clock. Claire hovered nearby, watching me with that infuriating calmness. She didn't say much, but her eyes spoke louder than words. "You won't win." The table was set, the food served, and for a while it almost felt normal. Laughter filled the room as Danny showed off his crayon drawings to his grandparents. My husband smiled. The tension momentarily softened, and then Claire leaned across the table, brushing her hand against my husband's arm, and whispered something that made him laugh. It was too much. My vision tunneled, and before I could stop myself, I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice trembling but loud enough to silence the room. Everyone turned to me, their smiles fading. I pulled the diary from my bag and slammed it onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "This is Claire's diary, and it proves she's been trying to replace me, to take my family away." Gasps filled the room. Claire froze for the briefest second, her mask slipping, before she quickly forced a laugh. "Anna, please, this again? You're embarrassing yourself." But I ignored her. My fingers shook as I flipped through the pages, reading aloud the words that had haunted me for weeks. "Danny already calls me mommy sometimes. Soon it'll be natural. She's weak. She doesn't deserve them. They belong to me. If he leaves her, we can be a real family." My voice cracked as I read the final line, "They will be mine." The room fell into stunned silence. My mother-in-law's eyes widened. My father-in-law muttered under his breath. My husband sat frozen, staring at the pages like he couldn't process the words in front of him. And Claire? She started to cry. Big, heavy tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched her chest. "That's not what it looks like. Those are just private thoughts, silly fantasies. I never meant for anyone to read them." "Fantasies?" I spat, my fury boiling over. "You fantasized about stealing my husband? About taking my son? About erasing me from their lives?" She sobbed louder, turning to my husband. She twisted everything. "You know me, I would never hurt Danny. I love him like my own, but that doesn't mean I want to replace Anna. She's just jealous." The word again, jealous. I wanted to scream, but my voice broke into a choked whisper. "Don't you see? This is exactly what I've been trying to tell you." My husband's face was pale, his jaw tight. He glanced from me to Claire, from the diary to Danny, who sat wide-eyed and confused by the chaos. His lips parted as though he might finally admit I was right, that he finally believed me. But instead, he stood abruptly, his chair toppling backward, and stormed out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire immediately seized the moment, rushing after him, her sobs echoing down the hallway. His parents exchanged uncomfortable looks, muttering excuses as they gathered their things and left quickly, leaving me alone at the table with my son. I stared at the diary lying open before me, its ink bleeding under the tears that had fallen onto the pages. My hands trembled as I closed it, the finality of the sound ringing in my ears. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had won. I had exposed her lies in front of everyone. The truth was undeniable. But as I sat there in the hollow silence of my dining room, one crushing reality sank in. Sometimes, even the truth isn't enough to save a family. The war wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. The night felt heavy with silence. After the revelation of the diary, Nothing in the house was the same. I kept my distance from both my husband and the babysitter, retreating into my own shell of mistrust. Every corner of the house felt tainted, like the walls themselves had absorbed the lies, whispers, and secrets that had unfolded under this roof. I wanted to scream, to demand that my husband finally admit what I already knew, that the babysitter wasn't just some misguided young woman, but a predator who had come into our lives with a plan. But when I looked at him, I saw only guilt and hesitation. He wasn't blind anymore, not after reading those chilling words in her diary, but he was weak, too paralyzed to take immediate action. And that weakness hurt me more than his disbelief ever had. The babysitter, on the other hand, didn't cower in shame. She didn't pack her bags and leave. Instead, she lingered in the house like a ghost that refused to be exorcised, moving with unsettling calmness, her eyes always following me. She didn't speak much anymore, but her silence was louder than words. I could feel her defiance in the way she smiled at my child, as though mocking me. One evening, I found her in my daughter's room, braiding her hair and humming softly. My daughter sat there, beaming with innocent joy, while the babysitter whispered, "Mommy's here." My blood froze, my vision blurred with anger. "No!" I snapped, stepping into the room. My daughter looked up, startled, but the babysitter didn't flinch. "I am her mother. Don't you dare call yourself that." The babysitter's eyes met mine, calm, steady, even pitying. "She doesn't correct me anymore," she said softly. "She knows who really takes care of her, who's always there when she cries at night, when she's hungry, when she wants to play. Where were you, really?" It was like a knife twisting into my chest, because deep down, I knew she had been there, filling cracks I didn't even realize had formed. And my daughter, my precious little girl, giggled and leaned against her, her tiny hand reaching up to touch the babysitter's cheek. I wanted to tear her away, to reclaim what was mine, but my husband appeared at the door. His face was pale, tired, but he didn't move to intervene. He didn't stop her. He didn't stop me. He just stood there, watching, torn between two worlds. Later that night, we fought again. The walls of our bedroom echoed with accusations and heartbreak. "Why is she still here?" I cried. "Why haven't you told her to leave? Do you need more proof than what we found in her diary? Do you need her to actually succeed before you do something?" His voice cracked as he answered, "She's just a girl, confused, lonely. Maybe she didn't mean any of it. Maybe it was all fantasy, not something she would really act on." "Fantasy?" I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "You saw the way she looks at our daughter. You saw how she parades around this house like she belongs here. This isn't fantasy. This is calculated, and you're letting it happen because you don't want to face the truth." He buried his face in his hands, and for the first time, I saw tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I don't know how to fix this without destroying everything." And that was when it hit me, the destruction had already begun. The moment he allowed her to plant herself in our lives, the moment he doubted me, everything we had built as a family began to crack. The foundation was already crumbling. The final blow came days later. I walked into the living room to find the babysitter sitting on the couch, my daughter curled in her lap, and my husband sitting across from them, silent. The babysitter held the diary in her hands, turning it over as though it were nothing more than a forgotten notebook. "You shouldn't have read it," she said, her voice smooth, almost smug. "It wasn't meant for you. Those were private thoughts. Dreams. A girl is allowed to dream, isn't she?" "Dreams?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "You dreamed about stealing my child, my husband, my life." She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Isn't that what every woman dreams of? A family of her own? Love? Stability? Maybe I just wanted what you took for granted." Her words dripped with poison, and I realized then that nothing would ever make her stop. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She was deliberate, dangerous, and unashamed. I turned to my husband, my voice trembling but firm. "It's her or us. Choose." He didn't answer right away. The silence dragged on, stretching into eternity. My daughter's innocent laughter filled the room, cutting through the tension like glass. And in that moment, I knew I had already lost more than I ever thought possible. The breaking point wasn't a single moment. It wasn't the diary or the whispered lies. It was the standing in my own home, watching my husband hesitate, watching my daughter cling to the woman who tried to erase me. The pieces of my family were slipping through my fingers, and no matter how tightly I held on, they kept falling away. And deep down, I feared the truth, that no matter what choice he made, the damage could never be undone. The air in the house felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. I could no longer sleep, no longer eat, my mind consumed by the constant fear of losing everything I loved. Every glance between my husband and the babysitter gnawed at me. Every time my daughter called out "Mommy," I held my breath, terrified of who she meant. It was then that I realized I couldn't wait for my husband to save us. He was too broken, too conflicted, too afraid to admit the truth. If I wanted to protect my daughter, to reclaim my life, I would have to take matters into my own hands. I began watching the babysitter closely, following her subtle movements, the way she whispered into my daughter's ear, the way she lingered in my husband's presence like a shadow he couldn't shake. She thought she was clever, but she underestimated me. She thought I was weak. One evening, while she was out on an errand, I went through her room. My hands shook as I opened her drawers, searching desperately for some and any that would finally tear away her mask and reveal her true face to my husband. And then I found it. Hidden beneath a pile of clothes was a small notebook, different from the diary we had already seen. This one wasn't filled with fantasies. It was filled with plans, detailed notes on our family routine, what time my husband left for work, when my daughter usually napped, what meals I cooked, when I went grocery shopping. Next to each note were sinister little comments, like "perfect time to be with him alone," or "she leaves her vulnerable here." My blood ran cold. This wasn't harmless dreaming. This was strategy, calculation, a blueprint for dismantling my life, piece by piece, until nothing was left of me. I snapped photos of every page with my phone, my hands trembling. I had proof now, proof that no one could deny. The chance to use it came sooner than I expected. A family dinner was planned for the weekend, a rare occasion when relatives from both sides would gather under one roof. I knew it was risky, humiliating even, but it was the only way. If I revealed the truth in front of everyone, there would be no escape, no denial. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully, my heart pounding in my chest. My daughter was excited, twirling in her little dress, while the babysitter hovered close, as though she belonged. My husband barely met my eyes, his silence heavy with unspoken guilt. As the evening unfolded, laughter and chatter filled the dining room, but I sat quietly, my mind fixed on what I was about to do. When the moment finally came, I stood, my voice trembling but loud enough to silence the room. "I need everyone to hear this," I said, pulling out my phone. Dozens of eyes turned to me, confused, curious. The babysitter froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. I opened the photos and began to read aloud, page after page of her disturbing notes, her sickening strategies, her obsessive desire to replace me. Gasps filled the room, and whispers spread like wildfire. My husband's face turned white as he snatched the phone from my hand, scrolling through the evidence himself. His lips trembled, his eyes glassy with shock. The babysitter tried to interrupt, tried to spin her lies one last time. "They're just notes," she insisted, her voice high and trembling. "Thoughts, nothing more. She's twisting everything. She always twists everything." But the damage was already done. The room erupted with disbelief and disgust. My relatives shook their heads, murmuring about how blind we had been, how dangerous it had become. My daughter clung to me, confused by the tension, and for once, she didn't reach for the babysitter. And then, my husband spoke. His voice cracked, raw with the weight of realization. "Get out," he said. "Get out of this house. Now." The babysitter's face twisted into something dark, something that sent chills down my spine. She stood slowly, her eyes locking onto mine with venom. "This isn't over," she whispered, so quietly that only I could hear. "You think you've won, but you'll see you can't erase me." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving the room in stunned silence. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptiness. The truth was out. The mask had been ripped away, but the scars she left behind were deep, carved into my family's heart. My husband sat at the table, broken, his face buried in his hands, while I held our daughter close, my own tears falling freely. Yes, the babysitter was gone, but so was the trust, so was the certainty, and I couldn't shake the fear that she had been right about one thing: this wasn't truly over. The shadow she cast over our lives would linger for a long, long time. The days after that dinner felt like walking through the ruins of a battlefield. The babysitter was gone, but her presence lingered in every corner of our home. I could almost hear her laugh echoing in the hallways, see her shadow in the kitchen where she used to stand too close to my husband, or feel her hand tugging at my daughter's when she whispered those poisonous words. "I'm Mommy." My husband barely spoke. He tried, in his own broken way, to apologize, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain siding with her over me? How could he take back all the moments when he called me paranoid, when he made me feel like I was the problem instead of the victim? Trust is fragile, and once it's shattered, the pieces cut deep. I wanted to believe him when he said he hadn't realized the depth of her obsession, but the truth was, he hadn't wanted to see it, and that choice had nearly cost us our family. For my daughter's sake, I tried to hold us together. She was too young to understand the betrayal that had taken root in our home. To her, the babysitter was just gone one day, like a nightmare fading at dawn. She clung to me more tightly than ever, though, and sometimes, late at night, I caught her whispering in her sleep, calling for Mommy, and again, my heart seized, wondering which one of us she meant. I began therapy, not just for myself, but for us as a family. I needed someone to help me untangle the knots of fear, anger, and grief that strangled me. My husband came reluctantly at first, ashamed of how easily he had been swayed, but eventually he sat in those sessions too, his eyes downcast, listening as the counselor explained the patterns of manipulation, the way predators creep into trust and exploit it. Even with help, the wounds didn't heal quickly. Some nights, I still woke in a cold sweat, convinced I'd hear her footsteps returning. I double-checked locks, scanned the yard from the window, my chest tightening with dread that she might come back to finish what she started. Her final words haunted me. "This isn't over." And yet, life moved forward in its strange, stubborn way. Slowly, the silence at dinner was replaced with small conversations. Slowly, the laughter of my daughter filled the house again, though I still clung to her every time she called me Mommy, desperate to remind myself that title was mine and mine alone. The hardest part was forgiving my husband. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a single act but a process, a long and painful one. He had betrayed my trust, yes, but he had also chosen, in the end, to protect us, to cast her out. Whether it was too late for our marriage, I still wasn't sure. But for our daughter, I was willing to try. In quiet moments, I asked myself if I had won. The babysitter was gone, her diary exposed, her lies shattered. But winning didn't feel like victory. Winning felt like survival, and survival comes with scars. One evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with her wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, you'll never leave me, right?" My throat tightened, tears stinging my eyes as I kissed her forehead. "Never," I whispered. "I will always be here. I will always be your mom." It was in that moment I realized the truth. The babysitter had tried to steal my life, my family, my very identity. She had nearly succeeded, but in the end, she failed. Because motherhood isn't a title you can take, it's a bond, unbreakable and eternal. The road ahead was uncertain. The damage couldn't simply be erased. The shadows couldn't vanish overnight. But I had my daughter in my arms, and no one-and-oh manipulative stranger, no betrayal could ever take that away from me again. And that was enough. This closes the story with lingering suspense, emotional weight, and a bittersweet sense of survival.